I want to talk about security, and I don't necessarily mean malware or the lock on your door or a burglar, a security system in your home so that nobody comes in and robs it. I just want to generally talk about the value of security. You know, for event professionals that you deal with all the time, because you've spoken at the $1 Million Roundtable, you've spoken at Top of the Table, you've spoken, is it 90 countries? 90 countries. Luxembourg was the 90th, where
It
we
was.
were just 2 weeks ago or so. Security is very important for them.
Yeah.
And again, security at an event, if you have a big name speaker like Sandro Forte and you want to make sure that they're not bothered by the paparazzi. But in all seriousness, job security, not that they're going to go to HR and say, I want a 5-year contract with guaranteed raises and bonuses, more that they're tuned with growing their capacities, development, professional development. And how I'd love to get your take on how an event professional, whether it's somebody early in their career or later on, how they can utilize this mindset that we've established in expanding their capacities as a professional.
Wow, that's another big topic that we'll try and unwrap very succinctly.
Take your time. Again, we have about 2.5 days left, so keep going.
Fantastic. So here's my take on it for what it's worth, Seth. I think that if I can kind of cut this up into two pieces. Firstly, I'm very cognizant of the fact that as a speaker, and I've had the privilege actually, and I recommend all speakers should do this. I've also had the opportunity to run events. So I know from firsthand experience the difference between a speaker that's really easy to work with and one that's not very easy to work with. And I talk about value and price a lot, and we might go down that road, we may not. But in terms of security for me, I talk a lot about, as you know, Seth, a lot about left and right brain as part of this whole mindset psychology piece. And again, to unpick that for those who perhaps don't study or haven't really thought about this, there are two very distinct parts of our brain. And I talked briefly earlier about conscious, subconscious. Now we're talking about left and right brain. So the left part of our brain typically is responsible for logic and the right for emotion. So when I'm typically engaging with an audience, when I'm engaging with a client, for example, I want to be very mindful of the fact that I have got to be communicating with both sides of the brain. What I see going on an awful lot is people lead with the right side of the brain. They talk about, the relationship and how it's important, and they make lots of decisions on a very emotional level and neglect the really logical stuff that underpins that emotional connection to something. And conversely, there are others that focus purely on the logical. Here are all the reasons we should do something, and they don't engage on an emotional level. So what I say to those, if we're talking about job security for a second, and I'm gonna come up with almost like the antithesis, I think, of what you would expect me to say here. For me, job security, if we use that as the analogy for a second, is not about accepting a job that is probably going to be around for the next 30 years on a certain level of income. And don't get me wrong, Seth, there are lots of people that would be very happy with that, just as there are lots of people in an audience where with the very best speaker in front of them, they are still going to do absolutely nothing as a result of what they've heard. That's a fact of life. And I always challenge audiences, recognizing that 50% of the audience will do absolutely nothing. Even if you hand them a solution on a plate, they won't do anything with it. But of those that really do want to get going, to move to the next level, to fulfill positive outcomes, then it's very much about, and I would say this to the job security seekers, particularly when you're young, when there's less at stake, try lots of different things, because what you learn very quickly is not just what you do want from life and business, but what you don't want from life and business. And, I held down half a dozen jobs because I had to help my mum. And, there were lots of things I wanted to be emotionally, but when I learned about the logical aspects of that decision-making process, it didn't work, didn't pull enough money, for example. So interestingly, I would say that be very aware of and cognizant of the fact that to make great decisions and to achieve great outcomes, to build amazing relationships, to find security in life, you need to be in touch with both sides of your brain and find a balance between the two. Because if it's one or the other, then you are probably going to make an emotional decision and regret it, or you will make a logical decision and it will be very uninteresting because you're not emotionally connected. And that's about as quick as I can answer that question.
No, I mean that's great. Here's where I went with listening attentively to your answer is, especially if you're younger in your career, not just because I'm going to willy nilly try new things, but there's a new opportunity, a different role, or a project. Take it on. Get your hands on as much of a breadth and a variety and a wide range of experience, especially when you're young. But the future of work and the post-pandemic work mindset, if you will, about a blend of working from home, remote work, back to the office, and every iteration of corporate mandate that's around. Every culture and every company, different size, different industries have approached it differently. But if you're young in your career, I think that you're going to suffer most if you're only and exclusively doing remotely, because that magic of being around the water cooler or walking in from the parking lot or getting up in the elevator or taking a lunch break or in the hallway making eye contact with somebody and saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm glad I caught you. I want to get your take on this idea." Or, I'm not a junior in my career, but if I run into somebody in my work and I want to, "Hey, let's go into the conference room. I want to run this by you," or, "How is this person doing?" I think it's really important, as far as in the context of job security goes, is to have that interaction, that magic, that spark of kind of being in the office. And that has nothing to do with a course you're taking or a new certification or a promotion or a guaranteed raise. It just has to do with being hungry and having your mind on connecting with people and learning from the widest range of experience early in your career as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly to my point. I think we're aligned in our thinking there, and really, perhaps I didn't articulate it very well, but to your point, Seth, the one part of that social interaction, that's the emotional connection that we all need. You know, Conversely, when people say to me, "I can't possibly build relationships via Zoom," you can still run a business, you can still run a conference, but is it the same on the same level as social interaction? Because that's the way, as human beings, we are largely built. The answer is absolutely no. So I think we're saying the same thing in slightly different ways, but are absolutely aligned in what we're saying.
Yeah, totally. And again, I emphasized in my soliloquy and my monologue a little bit about more of an emphasis on younger in your career, but I think it's across the board because, like you said, there are cues in that side of your brain that you just, when you're one on one or physically within a group dynamic, there's subconscious communications, whether it's a glance, a head tilt, body language, that are being registered that communicate on such a high level where people can understand something with a deeper sense that you're just not going to get in Zoom. And so many times I can tell you that in person, I've been able to, whether it's gain a new account, expand an existing account, or provide something that I would just take the case, never would have come up digitally, whether it's, on Zoom or otherwise. So we are aligned in that thinking, and the value of the job security tied to education. And education is all about, growing and expanding, which requires interacting and sharing ideas and having healthy debate, is kind of where that job security sparks from, at least in my view.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.